All right, I told you, today is the day. Does the streak end, or do we keep shouting out for the entirety of forever? I left it up to you guys. So, the results. Before we begin, thank you very much to Zachary G for joining the Patreon campaign. Very appreciated. You know, I thought you'd run out by now, but I seriously, I almost have enough shout outs now to make it all the way to the end of the month, which would be 6 months, a solid year. You have kept me shouting you guys out instead of actually doing a normal intro, which is just a nothing intro. But for some reason, you guys don't want to hear it. You'd rather keep me doing this. And you know what? Fair game. If you're enjoying it, please, by all means, I'm not going to stop you. And I thank you very much for keeping it up. So, today I hit on a topic that I've been wanting to do for a while. But every time I try this, it's more and more surprising. So, no secret that Hasbro loves to name dump. Take random characters from random things, from just various different series, and make sure they hold those trademarks, because in order to hold a trademark in the US, you have got to actually show that you are using it regularly. So, that's what name dumping is for. Random toys get random names from different toy lines, so they try to keep everything afloat at once. This is going to be a list of all the times that this is intersected between Transformers and G.I. Joe. And just for the sake of simplifying it, I'm sticking to just the Real American Hero line, because if we go into all the extended G.I. Joe series, I could keep this up even longer, but as it is, I think we're going to end up with a longer video today. And the video starts with an unusual one, which is Lift Ticket. Now, I do not know. Like, obviously, the name Lift Ticket comes from something, but it's not part of my daily vernacular, so it's a very strange term to me. So when they said that the Diaclone Red hoist repaint was going to be named Lift Ticket, I kind of scratched my head. I'm not a big G.I. Joe guy, so I started learning a lot about these characters doing the research for this video. So Lift Ticket is a G.I. Joe name. It's actually one of the more classic names. It's for their Tomahawk pilot. Had no idea. So it's an instance of them renaming a random Transformer character who had no actual official name in American fiction, just so they could keep the title on a G.I. Joe trademark, just in case they ever do the Tomahawk again. Fair play. Fair play. So we're going to start the list with a bunch of these randos, ones where the names come up much later in Transformers lifespans, which includes things like Slipstream. So Slipstream was the pilot of a Conquest in G.I. Joe, whereas in Transformers we know it to be the female Starscream clone, or just the more popular female Seeker whenever one happens to pop up in a cartoon or a comic book. Again, I'm not terribly familiar with the G.I. Joe character, just to suffice to say, you can tell here, they don't really care how consistent the names are between these characters. One's a Joe, one's a Decepticon, one's male, one's female. I think the only thing they have in common is that they're in the air. I think that's literally it, and that's kind of a trend amongst all of these. How about Backstop? Again, a name that was super weird to me, because like the only backstop I'm familiar with is that cage behind the batter in baseball, which doesn't seem like the most intimidating thing to name your like superhero, soldier, or robot. But backstop was the name of a G.I. Joe mobile support equipment operator, or the driver of the Persuader, from the listings that I saw. And also, yeah, it is the Rhino from Transformer Cybertron that my Plastic Addict fans are very familiar with. Still a weird name. Backstop is, again, not a name that really strikes fear into Cobra or the Decepticons, but you know what? Okay, fine. Sticking with Cybertron, let's see Hardtop. Space Vehicle Launch Operator. Which also means, and also, so I'm looking at the names of what they put on the card, but I'm also looking at what the listings told me their function was. So like Hardtop also comes up as the G.I. Joe crawler driver, and they do reuse a lot of these characters with, various names. I'm trying to use the original depictions as much as possible. Needless to say, I'm pretty sure he got the name Hardtop because he's wearing a hard hat, which seems a little unimaginative. But I guess when all you do is get the shuttle ready for launch, I guess you take whatever code name that's lying around at the time. Whereas I always laughed at Hardtop because Hardtop doesn't have a top. He has a roll bar, which I don't think qualifies as a top, which I would call him Hollow Top. But that doesn't save the G.I. Joe name, now does it? So Hardtop it is. How about Knockdown? We had to pull a little bit in order to get this one. So I have him listed as a Sky Sweeper driver as well as an anti-aircraft specialist, which has absolutely nothing to do with being a Minicon Triceratops. So this is where we're pulling like obscure ones where sometimes I don't even think it may be intentional. The name Knockdown might have crossed a lawyer's mind at Hasbro going, oh yeah, we used that name before. But when they're coming up with the names and just like the design meetings, I don't think anyone even like batted an eye. Oh yeah, like Triceratops knocks things down, knockdown. Check the box, sell it. All right, so I'm getting that kind of vibe, where that might not have been intentional, where some of these absolutely are. Payload. Right, so here we actually do have a theme. We have a theme. So Payload is an astronaut character in G.I. Joe. In fact, beside me to the right, I can pick it up here, make sure we have the Crusader shuttle, which actually does, originally included the Payload pilot. So it's the one Joe I didn't need help figuring out if it was a Transformer name or not. And of course, we used it for a Minicon, who is the one that it's the Minicon that turns into the Skyblast carrier, the carrier for the spaceship. So okay, at least you have a space theme worked out there. So okay, I'll give credit for that. They kept that one alive. Backblast, speaking of said spaceship in its Decepticon repaint form, Backblast have listed as an anti-aircraft soldier, which is a little ironic considering it was reused for an aircraft. All I'm saying. All right. How about Freefall? Now, okay, remember, I had to pull from like really weird sources for this list. These are just like, might be coincidental, but Freefall in G.I. Joe is a paratrooper, which makes absolute sense. In Transformers, it's just this little Creo guy who turns into some weird dragon-winged bug. I don't know why it's a Freefall, but apparently he doesn't fly very well, or else why would he be called Freefall? Firefly. One of the rare instances of a Cobra member actually sharing names with a Transformer, though the Transformer shares the name completely by accident, because it's supposed to be Fireflight from the Aerial Bots. Trademark not available? Use the next closest thing. They've got Firefly for G.I. Joe, name him Firefly. Okay, that seems fair enough. Yeah, but one of the very few times, because Cobra names tended to be a little bit more like on the nose. Baroness, Destro, Cobra Commander, Serpentor, things that don't really come up as like, oh yeah, that's that could definitely be a Transformer name. I never saw the Transformers name Tomax and Zaymot. Could be someday. You never know. But for now, it's a rare instance when a Cobra shared a name with a Transformer. Let's move on. Long Arm. Long Arm comes with a ton of stuff. So yeah, this one, and he's one of the later Joes from the Real American Hero line. And of course, we have Long Arm that we best know from Transformers animated, but there is a Cybertron Minicon that bared the name first. So yeah, we know where that one came from. So this is all just like incidental stuff. Might have been intentional, might not have been. Let's go into the ones that are absolutely intentional because they're bigger, because these actually came from around the same time period. Now we're going to go into Real American Hero toys that came out around and shared the names of G1 Transformers. So some of these were used just a few years apart from each other. Absolutely intentional name dumping. And we start with the most famous one, which is Roadblock. All right, so of course, classic G.I. Joe character, one of the most popular ones. And in G1 for Transformers, he was one of the Ultra Pretenders. Ironically, between the rubber O-ring on one and the gold plastic on another, they're both just as likely to break on you. The least with Roadblock, you can replace a rubber O-ring. There ain't no fixing the gold plastic. I'm sorry, he's just gone. How about Barricade? Now, modern day, we know Barricade to be the 07 Decepticon who turns into the mean police car, which is a fine identity to have. But the name was originally sourced from a Generation 1 Micromaster, and yeah, it came out around the same time as Barricade and G.I. Joe, who now he seems to have a gold plastic issue of his own, unless that is all painted on. I'm not entirely sure. I see a gold helmet with him, so one way or another, I think he's breaking. Just saying. How about another one? Dogfight. Look at the mustache on Dogfight. And I don't mean the robot. Oh boy. So, yeah, Dogfight, very late G1 toy. Before they got into like the heavy gimmick stuff. Just like a simple little figure. And then Dogfight is the pilot of the Mud Fighter. Not entirely sure what the Mud Fighter is, but I don't think anything's getting through that mustache, so no matter what it is, it's not stoppable. Just run. Run. So, fun. So, here's one that I was actually surprised that you could use two different ways, but actually, fun thing with English language, this works. Scoop. In Transformers, the name Scoop is incredibly literal. He's got a big scoop on the front of his vehicle mode. Simple as that. In G.I. Joe, he's an information specialist, which means scoop is a play on the reporter term of getting a good story. That's actually kind of neat. So, okay. So basically, the only thing they really share is the love of the color orange. But it's kind of cool that they managed to flip the name so easily. It works really well. How about Countdown? And again, they hit on a space theme for both. Countdown, of course, in G1 comes from the Micromaster spacecraft base, whereas Countdown in G.I. Joe is just straight up an astronaut. So fair play. There's some names where they just know the assignment and they don't disappoint. Countdown is a space thing. Always make it a space character, right? The simple one. Let's go with a simple one and go with Recoil. Recoil is a name I feel like you could throw on just about any random generic G.I. Joe character, and it would make absolute sense. The gimmick to Recoil, if you can tell by the arm, he's a long-range recon patrol, but the gimmick is that he has this crazy guns with support armatures to help the recoil from the weapons. So I presume he can use more powerful weapons because he has this little skeletal arm to support. Whereas Recoil in G1 is just a target master. And of course, you're going to name the target master after a gun term, right? So no big shock there. Not a whole lot of comparison between them outside of just being very gun oriented. How about Grand Slam? Which is a weird combination. So aside from, Grand Slam obviously in G1 is just Blaster's tank cassette. In G.I. Joe, he's a laser artillery soldier, but he does vaguely dress up like, he vaguely just dresses up like a catcher in football. Or baseball, sorry. Catcher in football. I didn't sleep much last night. So, yeah, aside from the fact that he's apparently wearing baseball pads, he seems to be taking it a little bit more literally than Grand Slam is. G1 Grand Slam. So that just strikes me as they like the name, so just used it more than once. Back to the aerial bot theme with Skydive, and again, Skydive makes absolute sense as a paratrooper with a big, one of those big working cloth parachutes, and obviously it's in G1, it's just an aerial bot. No surprise though that the aerial bots and G.I. Joes end up sharing a lot of these names, because there are only so many aerial names that Hasbro is throwing around at the time, so obviously they would want to keep using them and keep them in circulation. How about a more intelligent one? Here's Mainframe. And the guys, these two Mainframes would get along swimmingly. So obviously Mainframe is one of the more, is depicted as one of the more intelligent characters during the Action Master range. Kind of their solution, they're kind of their version of Perceptor at that late G1 phase, whereas Mainframe is a computer specialist in G.I. Joe. I think the two would get along swimmingly. Now, admittedly, I don't follow the G.I. Joe crossovers as much because they are, like, super weird sometimes. But if these two have ever come in contact with each other at some point, that would actually be interesting to me. So, let me know in the comments if the two Mainframes have met, because that would be interesting. I wonder if I wonder if any Transformer crossover G.I. Joe comic has ever taken advantage of these names that match, because they did that in like the Sonic and the Mega Man crossovers where they both had a shadow. So that was fun. I'm going off topic. Let's keep going here. Let's talk about Crankcase. So Crankcase is the driver of the Stalker in G.I. Joe, whereas it's a Triggercon in Transformers. Not a whole lot comparing these two. Again, and with a name like Crankcase, I think all you have to do is drive something, right? I think just as long as you drive, you can be called Crankcase. How about something really different? Overkill. I almost said Overlord, which there is an Overlord, but I intentionally left out any names that matched UK and Japanese Transformers. I specifically wanted to focus on the times that Hasbro renamed their own characters after past characters here. So, yeah, not a whole lot of comparing the cassette to the Cobra Bat leader. I didn't even know the Cobra Bats had a leader. I thought they were just a bunch of robots. You said, go that direction, shoot people with American flags. I figured that's all that the Bats were. I didn't realize they had some guy in charge of them. He's not doing a great job. The Bats always lost. But though, both named Overkill, which I guess for a Cobra agent, Overkill makes sense, right? Outback. So obviously we know the G1 character with the Australian accent and the one appearance in the old cartoon. But the Outback in G.I. Joe makes me laugh so much. So he's this Chuck Norris looking guy. Camo, and I love the fact he's a survivalist. If you couldn't guess by the fact that he has survival written across his chest. Which is the kind of choice that makes because keep in mind, we didn't have Bear Grylls yet. We didn't have a stereotypical look for a survival expert back in the 80s. So the best they could have is Chuck Norris in a white polo shirt with the name Survival written on it. Okay, fine. T-shirt. Someone fashion sense is going to give me a nightmare over saying polo shirt. It sounded funnier in my head at the time. I know, it just strikes me as a designer going, well, we want a survivalist, but we don't know what a survivalist looks like. So let's just print survival across his chest. It's funny to me. All right, Blast Off. Look at Blast Off. Okay, so this is one of the, heavier ones. So Blast Off in G.I. Joe, flamethrower user. And look how much stuff he comes with. He's got missile launchers. He's got a jetpack armor you can snap onto him. It looks like he comes with a tub of slime too. That was a big thing back in the time. And of course, Blast Off we just know as the space shuttle from the Combaticons. It's way too small for his vehicle mode, but we ignore it because he's a nice boy. So again, fairly different on that front. Cloudburst is exceedingly different. So Pretender in Transformers, in G.I. Joe, an interesting packaging style. He looks very tiny because they packed so much attention into the glider, and it's carded. It's not like in a box the way a lot of G.I. Joe vehicles would be. It's carded and on a bubble, which is weird. It's the only vehicle, it's the only thing that size in G.I. Joe that I've seen that done to. It's odd choice. It is an odd choice, but I guess they really wanted to show off what the glider looked like. It's my best guess, anyway. All right, so we need to wrap this up here, and we're gonna wrap it up with some pretty. We're gonna wrap it up with some pretty big ones. How about that? Some of the bigger Transformer names that also appeared in G.I. Joe. Names like Gears, who in G.I. Joe was a power fighter figure. Invention Technician is the official job of him, but like named Gears specifically, I assume because he comes with a bunch of gear. He comes with a whole mech suit, which again, me not knowing G.I. Joe, did not know was a thing. So it's a very different interpretation for that name. How about different in this? Mirage. Now, obviously, with a name as cool as Mirage, you want to keep it around. So a later G.I. Joe ends up carrying a G1 first-year Transformers name just to keep it alive. He is a bio-artillery expert, which now the slime can that comes with these Mega Marines makes sense. But again, he comes with missiles, strap-on everything. He's got a lot of gear. Looking like one of the lead characters of Contra. Let's see who else is next. Oh, Blaster. Okay, could G.I. Joe Blaster look any more generic? He's just a guy. He's just a soldier with a weird-looking gun. It's hilarious to me. Blaster is, again, a name I feel like you could just stick onto any random soldier toy. Say it's a G.I. Joe named Blaster, and people would go with it just because, it's just there. Blaster is a Blaster in G1 is a boombox. At least has, like, some kind of personality to why he's called Blaster. He blasts sound, Like, that makes sense. Blaster on a G.I. Joe is just a guy who shoots things. Which is a little plain. One that I did not realize was reused, but it makes sense. Shockwave. Shockwave in G.I. Joe is a SWAT specialist. I'm not sure how that applies to the name Shockwave, but hey, it's a cool name. You don't want to lose it. But ironically, they did. We went through the Shock Blast period where we couldn't use the real name, which is still kind of weird, And the fact it makes weirder when you realize that they were using it for their two biggest toy lines at the time, and yet they still managed to lose the trademark for a while. It's a little odd. And again, we got polar opposites going here. We're going to end it off on the weirdest one I found. Now, if I extend beyond, like I said, there's some weird instances. They reused the name Iguanus for a G.I. Joe character. I never expected to see that. But there was one term in particular that I thought was really strange that it was actually attached to a G.I. Joe character, the tail end of Real American Hero. And that is Predacon. They actually used the name Predacon in 1994, 2 years before Beast Wars would completely change the definition of that name. Predacon was a four-armed alien because apparently they just ran out of terrorists in 1994, so they just started throwing G.I. Joe up against aliens. We know what Transformers did to try and stay relevant and try and stay exciting in a competitive toy market during its last years. I did not realize G.I. Joe fans went through the same thing. It was just like, let's see if it works. Oops, it didn't work. Well, shut the toy line down. Start working on G.I. Joe Extreme. Get us updated to the 90s. I thought it was the funniest one to see attached to a G.I. Joe character. And that's where we're going to end it off here. Like I said, I could go longer, but we've already gone over 20 minutes as it is. And it's just what happens in the toy world. You have the names, you have the trademarks, they're expensive to register, so you want to keep them as long as possible. And naturally, when you do the character again, you'd like the name to be available when you do. So, makes a lot of sense that we see a lot of this crossover between the two. So, I hope you learned something today. I learned a few weird things about G.I. Joe I was not aware of before, so I will walk away a little bit more informed than I used to be. Thank you guys for watching. I will see you all next time.
I'm like, I think you guys got this. I will back away, and I will see you all later.
You've got this handled.
Alafi's like, really? You're not gonna help me? Like, it's fine now.
It's like these disgusting creatures breathing down my neck, and you're all just like, I believe in you. You got this.
All right, you seem to have this. 5 minutes.